So let's talk about effects racks. We have audio effects racks and MIDI effects racks. So within Ableton 11, you can actually adjust and either add or reduce the amount of macros that you have for each one. Very, very useful tool. For the main reason that you can actually see what you're using, because if you have, just say you have an audio effects rack with 3 things that you need to macro, well, you can have those 3 things displayed rather than 4 or 8 or whatever. So that tidies things up a wee bit and has less things on screen that you need to look at and be confused by. Also, you can have up to 16 macros now, and down to as little as 1 macro, in view, which is really interesting, and it just makes things much more straightforward, in my opinion, at least. Anyway, especially for live. So if you're using Ableton for live performance, and you want the least amount of things on screen, so whatever you have on screen is what you need for your performance. It's fantastic for that. There's also a randomization tool, and it's fantastic. Again, I love randomization and chance and probability. They've started sneaking some of that in around Ableton 9.5 and 10, and yeah, it's there's a lot more coming now with Ableton 11. So you can basically randomize a lot of parameters within the effects racks. So we're going to have a look at that now too. There's a few other things that we're going to look at as well. We're going to have a look at how to save different instances of an effects rack. So you could have, I don't know, 3 or 4 different effects within a rack. Say it's a rack that you use to process drums. You might like to process drums 3 or 4 different ways, so you can save different instances of these effects within one drum rack, which is fantastic as well. It declutters a lot of things, and it saves you having loads of different instances of the one thing. Saved within your audio effects racks, and you have to go through loads of different columns of trying to find the right one. So it helps with that too. There's loads of other things as well. So let's have a look at it now within Ableton, and I'm going to give you an example here first of all, and then we'll actually dig into it a little bit. So this is just a base thing that I put together. Literally just to give you an example. It's nothing special, but that's fine. So what I'm going to do, just tighten that up a wee bit. So essentially what I have in here is a audio effects rack, and lots of different effects in here, but they're not actually macro to anything yet. So at the minute I have 8 macros. So say if I just want to macro one thing, well, you now have a plus and minus sign here, so I can just hit the minus sign until I'm down to 1 macro, and then that might affect the dry and wet of the grit and dirt audio effect, which is an effect within Ableton. So if I just click this, and now that's just that one effect. Okay, so that's one way to tidy things up. So maybe that's the only thing that I want to change in all of this. So then I can MIDI map that to MIDI keyboard or something like that. So that could be one thing. Now, just to make you aware of this, I'm going to just add some more macros. So maybe I want to add a variation to the transient shaper within the drum bus. So I'm going to map that to macro 2. And you can see here now there's 16 choices rather than what it used to be, which was 8. So now I have that mapped to macro 2. Maybe I need to add some more. You get the idea, yeah? So say if I add the feedback of the phaser to 3, so the phaser flanger is kind of, it's had a facelift too. I'll do a separate tutorial on that. And then maybe the drive of the dynamic tube, and I think that's all I want to do, right? So it's just I basically need 4. Now, before I minimize this to 4, I want to show you something here. You have a randomize button now that was never here before. Okay, so we always had our map button, and we can set different parameters within the randomization. Minimum and maximum amounts. It's a lot of MMs. So essentially, what I can do here is I can map that as normal. But there's a randomization button. So essentially, if you macro any of the parameters from any of these devices, if you macro those to any of the macros that you have available, you can then randomize the values of these macros, and therefore it'll randomize the amounts that we have macroed. So for example, if I wanted to randomize the dry wet here, I would randomize the dry wet for the dirt and grit. Makes sense. So what you can do is if I hit randomize here now, it's going to randomize all 4 values. Each time I click it, we get a different variation. Really interesting. So let's quickly move into another track to have a look at another thing that you can do with the randomization. Say if you have, well, it doesn't matter how many you have, say you have between 1 and 16 different macros set up and you only want to randomize a particular amount of them. There may be one that you do not want to randomize. I don't want to randomize the gain, but I want to randomize everything else. I can just right click and exclude macros from randomization. Simple as that. So now when I randomize, the gain stays the same and everything else moves. So very, very important tool for you to use and know where it is. So let's go back now to the other track. So sometimes if you're stuck for a bit of inspiration, this is quite good, but sometimes it just throws up some interesting stuff that you might not do yourself. So that's worth doing. But also, you can actually, MIDI map this or key map this. So if I press Command and K or Control and K and then press number 1, you now see that, well, I already done that, I'll just delete it so you can see it. So if I press 1, that shows up under random. Now if I press 1 on my keyboard, you'll be able to see what's going on. If I do this, one of my cameras isn't working for some reason. Not to worry, but basically what I was going to show you there is just me pressing the key on the keyboard, not to worry. So every time I press 1 now on my keyboard, it's randomizing the values. So that's a quick way to get some randomization into your sound. Okay, so what else can we do? Well, say I like this version, but I want a couple of different versions that I want to bounce between. Well, that's doable as well. So there's a button here that shows or hides your macro variations. So this is new. So actually, before I do that, I'm just going to take this down. I only need these 4 macros, so I'm going to just take the amount down to 4. All right, so we can see that now. Next, I'm going to add the show and hide variation button. Now I can add this variation that we have here with these. That's variation 1. Now I can randomize this. Get something else that I like. This one, and add that as well. So that's now variation 2. And I can keep doing this until I get a few different variations that I'm into. Can add that for variation 3. So now we can jump between the different variations. So there's so many possibilities with this, to be totally honest. There really is. It's fantastic. It's a really, really good option. It's like one of those ones where you see it, you think, why did I not think of that? That's amazing. So yeah, pretty delighted with that one. I'm going to add another macro as well. I'm going to add the dry and wet to macro 5. So then I'm going to randomize some of these. Yeah, so I'm going to add that to 4. So what we could potentially do now is I've randomized here. If I go into the key map, I'm going to just take that out of there. I'm going to just delete that. So Command or Control and K to get into that. Now I'm going to go back into it again, and you can see some of the options here now as well. So I can you've got play, down, up, and then last or first, right? So you can add some variation here if you want. So let's try it and see. So if I click here and press 1, and then use this for 2, use this for 3, okay, and then Command and K. So I can jump between all these now if I want. So it's just playing through the different cycles. That's one way to do it. There is another way as well. Just to jump through the different variations if you want to do that. You could have this MIDI map as well if you want, and have triggers for all these different things. I'm just doing it because I'm using a computer keyboard at the minute. But if I press 1, 2, 3, 4 on that, Command K, and then you get 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can jump between them as well. So really, really helpful and interesting tool for live performance or for just jamming out ideas. Yeah, and for saving lots of nice presets on the one thing as well. So there's loads of things that you can do with that. So hopefully that kind of helps you just to understand where everything is and how to save different variations and how to add and subtract macros. So again, you can add up to 16, which should keep you covered for most eventualities. And then you can actually just have one here as well if you want and mess around with that. So that is pretty much everything for now. And I will see you in the next tutorial. Cheers, folks. Thank you.